Welcome to a world where family secrets aren't just whispered, they explode, changing everything in an instant. Tonight, every betrayal, every hidden agenda, and every shocking twist comes alive. Picture a lavish dinner that turns into a battlefield of envy and cruelty. A husband whose charming facade hides lies, affairs, and manipulations, and a family's polished image crumbling under the weight of long-buried grudges. Emotions flare, alliances shift, and humiliation becomes a weapon in a game no one saw coming. Here, every glance, every whispered word, every carefully hidden secret can spark a reckoning, and every insult can be turned into poetic justice. If you love raw, intense family dramas that expose betrayal, unmask deception, and deliver ultimate revenge, you've just found your new obsession. Stay ready, because tonight nothing is off limits, and the truth will leave everyone stunned. The room shimmered with crystal chandeliers and polished silver, a dinner meant to celebrate, but the air was thick with tension before the first toast. Conversations flowed like wine, yet every laugh carried a bite. Every glance felt like a challenge. It started as subtle snubs, a whispered comment here, a tight smile there, but the undercurrents of envy and loyalty ran deeper than anyone expected. The husband sat across, smiling politely, but behind that facade, a network of secrets and calculated moves pulsed like a hidden heartbeat. When the first cruel remark landed, the atmosphere shifted. What was meant to be light teasing turned sharply personal, directed at one vulnerable target, and the subtle sneers of family members became impossible to ignore. It wasn't just humiliation, it was exposure, a public peeling back of pretenses. The laughter that followed wasn't joy, it was venom, sharpened by years of grudges no one dared speak aloud. The tension grew like a storm. Every dish served, every toast raised carried undercurrents of accusation and hidden judgments. Secret alliances revealed themselves in the smallest gestures, a hand brushing against another's, a fleeting look that said more than words ever could. Even the husband, whose charm had always masked ambition, could not hide the way he shifted in his seat, betraying the complicity he had woven behind closed doors. It was impossible not to see how deep the betrayals ran, how carefully family members had learned to play roles while sharpening knives beneath the table. As the night progressed, the crowd's reaction became a mirror reflecting the raw emotions no one admitted. Anger simmered beneath forced politeness, envy glittered behind polite smiles, and disappointment gnawed at the edges of every conversation. Words once considered harmless carried weight, and every gesture felt calculated, rehearsed, designed to wound in a way that would leave reputations dangling, teetering on the edge. By the end of the evening, the grandeur of the gathering had been stripped bare, leaving only the stark reality of deceit, hidden grudges, and fractured loyalty. The husband's smiles, the family's whispers, the mocking tones, all of it etched into memory, a public record of humiliation that could not be undone. The fire it ignited would not fade quietly. It started with a misplaced text, one that shouldn't have been seen, yet landed like a dagger in the middle of a seemingly perfect life. The messages revealed more than just infidelity. They exposed a carefully curated web of lies and manipulations that had been hiding in plain sight. Every revelation twisted the knife. Secret meetings, hidden bank accounts, whispered promises to others that had once been sworn to loyalty. The husband's charm, once admired, now felt like a mask that concealed decades of deceit. The family's reactions were instantaneous. Faces that had once been warm and familiar tightened with shock and anger. Conversations fractured, glances became loaded with suspicion, and the comfortable rhythms of family life shattered. The husband tried to smooth over the cracks with rehearsed apologies and hollow smiles, but every attempt only revealed more contradictions, more inconsistencies. What had been trust now felt like a dangerous illusion, a fragile veneer that could snap at any moment. Secrets spilled like a storm, each one more damning than the last. Friends from the past appeared in memories no one had questioned before. Affairs that had gone unnoticed, promises broken in the dead of night, manipulations that had steered choices, careers, and loyalties in directions no one had suspected. The weight of betrayal pressed on everyone in the room, making it impossible to breathe without thinking about what had been hidden for so long. Anger ignited quickly, flaring in whispers and pointed remarks that could not be ignored. Suspense built in the tension between what was seen and what had been kept secret, in the growing realization that the husband had carefully orchestrated a life of convenience and control. Every revelation became a weapon, every glance a reminder that the web of lies had ensnared more than one person. By the end of the night, the truth was undeniable. The house that had once felt like a sanctuary now carried the weight of betrayal, of secrets that could never be undone. The husband's facade had crumbled, leaving only the raw, unfiltered consequences of a life lived in manipulation. And in the silence that followed, it became clear that the game had only just begun. The moment the tension became unbearable, the polished image the family had worked so hard to maintain began to crack. Smiles froze mid-laugh, eyes darted toward corners where whispered grievances had been held in check for years, and every word spoken felt loaded with the weight of unspoken grudges. The husband, once the center of calm charm, now appeared exposed, his carefully cultivated persona slipping under the pressure of decades of hidden resentment. Conversations turned into subtle duels, a compliment twisted into a jab, a casual remark sparked suspicion, and polite nods carried the sting of judgment. Everyone around the table seemed to hold secrets sharper than knives, and the air hummed with the unrelenting tension of old wounds finally demanding attention. The layers of emotional suppression peeled away slowly, revealing betrayals that had been carefully concealed, manipulations that had been masked as concern, and alliances that were anything but loyal. Every interaction became a test. Patience wavered under the weight of truth, wit was sharpened to counter veiled insults, and strategy dictated every movement. It was no longer about maintaining appearances, it was survival in a battlefield where betrayal had no rules. Even the husband's attempts at control felt futile, as family members began to navigate the fractures in ways that exposed not only his lies, but the fragility of the relationships he thought he had mastered. The tension built with every glance, every pause, every strained laugh that failed to mask the awareness of deception. Secrets long buried emerged in unexpected bursts, a hidden grudge over a past injustice, a financial betrayal no one had suspected, a whispered story of loyalty broken for personal gain. The polished exterior of family life was gone, leaving only raw emotions, sharp accusations, and the uncomfortable truth that nothing could ever be taken at face value again. In the midst of this unraveling, it became clear that control had shifted. The carefully constructed world the husband had manipulated for years was now cracking at every seam, leaving him vulnerable to the very forces he thought he had suppressed. And in that exposed silence, the reckoning began to take shape. The humiliation from that dinner was a wound too deep to ignore, but it became the spark for a plan that had been forming in silence, patiently, like a storm gathering strength. Every whisper overheard, every smirk, every glance of derision was cataloged and stored, ready to be turned into a weapon. The husband, with all his charm and manipulations, had underestimated the power of what had been pushed aside, thinking the embarrassment would fade, but the embers had already ignited. Secrets that had once been hidden in shadows were pulled into the light with precision. Financial betrayals, lies, and clandestine affairs became tools in a carefully choreographed strategy. Family members who had once seemed untouchable were reconsidered, alliances recalculated, and loyalties tested. The very people who had laughed and mocked were now confronted with truths they had ignored, leaving them exposed in ways they could not deny. Every interaction became a move on a chessboard. The husband's confidence wavered as carefully planted revelations began to ripple through the family, dismantling the control he had thought untouchable. Conversations that once concealed resentment now carried the weight of judgment, and subtle gestures became instruments of accountability. Every plan, every small maneuver was designed not for revenge alone, but for empowerment, turning the shame that had been imposed into leverage. Even as the husband tried to regain composure, cracks continued to widen. Allies shifted in unexpected directions, exposing loyalties that had been assumed. The family's polished veneer crumbled further under the pressure of unmasked truths, and the dinner that had seemed like an ending became the prelude to a reckoning. The humiliation that had once threatened to define the moment was now overshadowed by a calculated display of control and intellect, a reminder that every insult could be returned tenfold and with impact. By the time the dust settled, the scene of shame had transformed into a stage of empowerment. The husband's smirk, once so confident, was replaced with the recognition of miscalculated pride. Every secret weaponized, every alliance shifted, and every hidden betrayal exposed had created a moment of poetic justice, a reckoning that could not be ignored. And as the echoes of that night lingered, it became clear nothing would ever be the same again. If this story left your jaw on the floor and your heart racing, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next shocking twist. Share your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think will face the next reckoning? Turn on notifications and join us as we continue diving deep into family secrets, betrayal, and revenge that will keep you on the edge of your seat.